Okay, we can start now.
Hey, why is a knuckleball so hard to hit? Scientist guy?
Is it? Are you looking for a joke answer or a real answer?
No, it's not a joke. When do I joke around?
Oh.
Right?
That sounded like the start of a joke.
No.
Why is a knuckleball so hard to hit?
I just when I was before you got here, I was just
Yeah.
pissing around with something. There's a knuckleball. What do you call it? A video
Video?
showing a knuckleball. Blah blah blah. So I'm actually a good knuckleball thrower. Right? Me
Really?
and Charlie, we play catch. We always throw in knuckleballs. Very little
Fun.
rotation. You see the seams coming at you. It's good. Anyways, my question is, why is it so hard?
To hit
If
it?
you think about a baseball player, you're getting 90 miles an hour in professional baseball is average. And a knuckleball pitch comes at you at 55 miles an hour.
Yep.
So why is it so hard to hit?
Multiple reasons.
Yeah, I want to hear
One-
your scientific reasons.
I think one is because of how much slower it is than
So you're
what you're
saying
used
off
to.
speed is number one.
off
Okay.
speed is one.
There you go.
Two is the movement of the ball. It's hard to track because the ball normally it comes in a straight line, or it comes in a way where you can project where it's going to go.
Yep.
Right. So even if somebody throws a curveball, if it starts going out like this, you know it's
Yeah.
coming back in. So
Yeah.
it follows a path that you can track and project in your mind to be like, oh, it's going to end up here.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's like when you're passing a puck, you pass where the person's going, and the person catching the pass is like, it's going to end up here. The person giving the pass is going to end up there. But if you throw a rotation on that you can't track anymore, where it's just floats and it might go right, left, up, down, you don't really know because it depends on what the air around it is doing.
That's
then,
exactly the reason.
Yeah. Then you can't.
Yeah, the spin. I don't know if this is the way to say it, but the spin controls the rotation, and the spin controls the trajectory of it.
Mhm.
Whereas without the spin, and it comes at you floating, the wind or the whatever, the air changes the direction.
Right.
So it's unpredictable. Even if you're a
Right.
pitcher, you don't know exactly where it's going.
Okay, side note to your knuckleball. This reminded me of if you ever go on an airplane.
Yeah.
Turbulence.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing as a knuckleball, except you're going really fast.
Really?
Because
How does that happen?
So when you track if you're trying to track like how the flow of the air goes over the wing of an airplane.
Yeah.
If you're doing it in a classroom setting or whatever, you always make everything ideal. So it's like it goes in this nice rounded flow over top of the wing.
Yeah.
But there's areas where when the air particles impact the wing, it starts to generate these little, I think the word is vortices. So it's not vertex, it's like a vortex, something like that, where like the impact of the air with the wing, it spins. Particles spin because they're impacting on the wing. They don't just hit and go nicely over. At the point of impact, it spins. So that's why sometimes if you're on a plane, you feel that like it like bumps up and down, whatever, because it's unpredictable. Like you said, you don't know how those particles are going to hit the wing and what that impact is going to do when you're flying through the air. So same thing with the knuckleball. It's something like that. I could be wrong about some of those details, but something like that. Same thing with the knuckleball. So when the ball is going through the air, the way that the air particles are hitting the ball causes different movements to the ball because it's actually bumping into the air particles, which is cool. Yeah, it's cool, eh? Because you think air is nothing. Like you think there's nothing there.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
know, but this is why the science. It's funny.
Yeah. I learned about that in school actually. I was on the aero team.
Knuckleball or the
airplane. I was on the I was on the aerospace team at school.
Yeah.
In my second year at university, and that was one of the things that some of the older kids were teaching me when I was in second year. They were saying it's easy to get an idea of how it's going to work.
Yeah.
But then when it comes down to actually modeling it in real life, it gets really complicated because of things like that. Like you have to get it down to the nitty-gritty of how will it handle certain situations that are unpredictable.
So do pilots have to adjust for it, or they just keep flying?
I'm not sure. I don't know what their training is like. I don't know how. I'm sure they're dealt to or taught to deal with like turbulence and whatever, obviously.
Of course.
But I don't know if they know it down to the level of what the flow is over because there's different types of flow that goes over the wing. There's a bunch of different sciencey words that I'll leave out for the moment, but you get the point. Cool question, though.
No, it's different.
I'm feeling mentally stimulated now.
Yeah.
It's good.
No, it's good. Like knuckleball, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
Some pitchers throw knuckleballs and knuckleballs only. Pretty sick.
I know who's the one. Who's the one like real well known knuckleballer? Do you remember his name?
Tim Wakefield.
Is that
Tim
him?
Wakefield was good. R.A. Dickey for
That's who
the
I'm thinking
Blue
of.
Jays was really
Yeah.
good. Tim Wakefield was really good.
Yeah, I was thinking R.A. Dickey, Tim
Yeah.
Wakefield. Those are the first two that came up too.
Yeah.
Look at you,
Yeah.
knowing baseball.
I was thinking old school. Kent Tekulve was a Pittsburgh Pirates. He threw like that underarm side underarm.
Yeah,
thing
the gyro pitch.
Is that what you call it? That would come in. It would come in like
gyro
high
ball
in the
kind of
low.
thing,
Yeah, that was weird.
I played with a guy that threw like that.
Yeah,
really hard to hit. So we did a podcast yesterday.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
That was fun.
Not
our podcast.
No.
We're guests.
This is the first time that we did a guest podcast together because we had done them separately, but that was the first time we did it together.
It was good. The good questions were good, and we had a good conversation. But you can't get in depth because you're trying to be polite too. Okay, Eric, you say something.
Right.
Andy, you say something.
Right.
It's like sometimes I can go on for 20 minutes straight.
Yeah, that's right.
As do you.
Right. So it was called the podcast is called Raising Men. So the guy that runs the podcast, his name's David. He's actually a member with us too. So we're gonna repost that for you guys to listen to when it comes out. He said he would let me know about it, but really good concept for a podcast. So I haven't listened to a lot of the episodes he's had, but the idea of it and what like the message he's trying to promote really aligns well with kind of the same stuff that we say here.
Yeah.
So it'd be a really good. I'm sure it would be a really good place for people to go that are looking for similar information from a different source.
Yeah, I think his thing is like, how do we raise our kids to, well, obviously raising men. I mean, I don't have to really spell it out, but when he was talking to me about it a couple months ago, he asked me if I wanted to be a guest, and I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. And I read a book from a Navy SEAL called Raising Men. It's decent. It's okay. But it's really good because I think a lot of the times, I was spilling something out to him the other day about that, right? About how sometimes like he was asking questions about our gym and how we do things and stuff. And that's what I was doing. I was explaining to him, like, in here, one of the things that we don't do is baby kids. Like with you in the gym, you have your rules up there. Put shit away. If you found it, put it back that way. And if you don't, leave. People aren't necessarily used to that in business. Like, especially in our type of business, a lot of people, it's like, whatever you guys want, you get because your mommy and daddy are paying for it, right? Even if you're 19 years old. But we're the opposite of that.
Yeah.
We're like, if you don't actually get here prepared and ready to go, then you can leave. And if you don't come back, that's fine, because we'd rather not have someone not trying to be the best they can and fit into our program. Yeah. Right. So but anyways, I like the concept of of raising men. That's good. And I think you get a lot of good guests on that. But what I found very interesting about him reaching out to us is because he wanted to know, because he has kids that play hockey, and one of them I know is a pretty good player, and the questions come up, and it was like partially for him and partially for other hockey parents that are involved. And it just sometimes blows my mind, the questions that are asked about taking your kids through hockey, because parents get so confused. And for me, like you addressed that yesterday, it's like it's easier for me to navigate through because I've been through it. So you would think,
right? Yeah.
So I've been through it as a player, as a coach, and as a trainer, and I've seen every type of parent and pretty much every scenario you could come up with. A crazy dad, a nice dad, or mom, or whatever. One that does nothing, a neutered cat dad. One that's so intense the kid just whatever. And everyone is looking for the secret, right? Everyone's looking for the secret. Like, what do I do? And one of the things I didn't get to say to Dave yesterday in his podcast, which, because some of the questions were like, everyone's playing spring hockey, and people say to go to spring hockey, and people do this, and they got private trainers, and a lot of times they hide information because they don't want someone to get a step up and stuff like that. So one of the things that I wanted to say, we didn't have a lot of time, was like, one of the things that you can measure if you're doing something properly or right or correct, whatever the word is if everybody's doing something, don't do it. Does that make sense?
I half agree, but yeah.
Yeah. Like, so if everybody's getting private lessons, that probably there's a different path, because if the average guy is doing the same thing, all the time, all the I don't want to say average, but if most of the people are doing one thing, it's probably the wrong thing. It's like if you go in investments, if you listen to Joe Buckshot, you know, back when the cannabis places opened up and stuff down here, it sounds logical. You know, this place is opened up, invest your money in there, put it all in. That's the way to go. And then every guy on the street saying the same thing.
Yeah.
That for me is like a red flag.
Yeah, I get your
Do you
point.
know what I mean?
Yeah, I get your point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
So like, or at least question it big time whether you're going to do what everybody else is doing.
I think that's the question, because sometimes that's a better way, I think, of putting it. Like, you have to question, right? Because sometimes the reason the crowd does things, or the reason there's a consensus about certain things, is because it is actually the right thing. But I get your point. It's like you can't just blindly follow and be like, well, they're all doing it, so I have to do it, or whatever, right? I don't want to be left behind, or I'm missing something. We've talked about all these types of things before, but I want to ask you a question. This is actually an interesting thing. It might open a whole can of worms, and then we might get lost, but it's all right. So for me, I really like this topic, but it's a little bit controversial, but I don't really know why. But I'm going to ask you the question anyways. It's going to lead into the controversy part. Okay. What do you think those two words mean together? We're like raising men, like to raise a man. Like what does that actually mean? It's like, it sounds cool, like it's very slogan-esque, but it's what do you think? Because I love that. Like, I think it's great, and there's a really good message underneath all that, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't get us too derailed. But
it depends what your concept of what a man is.
Right.
Right. That's number one.
This is what I want to get into.
Yeah. It depends on what you would consider a man. Like, and I would consider, like, a lot of people that call themselves men babies. Right. You know, in a lot of times. Yeah. And you know, so it's like, what does a man do? Like, and it's not to be like so testosterone driven that it's, you know, I'm the man of the house, you do what I say. In fact, I think it's the opposite. It's like that dichotomy, right? I would be a good example of, in my house, I feel like, okay, I'll use the one thing that I could say that I know more than my wife. Like, one thing would be raising my son in hockey. True? Yeah, 100%. If you want to argue that, well, come on. So there's a lot of times where my wife would be, well, just because you don't know everything about it, it's like, oh, I kind of do. Not everything, but I know most of it. Like, I have a lot more. But at the same time, I have to listen and get her feedback on things. So if I'm what you could call a man, like the old school, I'm alpha, a man. Yeah. It's like, no, I'm right, you're wrong. What I say goes. Well, that's not a man. That's a very insecure person that can't have a conversation, right? It's being able to have an intelligent conversation and reason, and let my wife have a say in something, and then come up with a conclusion. And maybe it's a little bit of a negotiable. Some things are negotiable, and some things, like, I have to put my foot down and say, in this situation, you just have to trust me that you're wrong, or you're right. That's a good point, because there's a lot of times she is right, because she looks at it from a different point of view, right? Yeah. If you always look through life through a straw, you only see one thing. So raising a man, but what I think that means is raise them to be responsible, raise them to be able to have some confidence, raise them to be able to not fear things, raise them so that they can raise kids. Like, one of the things that I always say about one of the best things that I've done as a dad is, and with all the kids that we train, is they see. I'm not saying that I'm I'm not saying I'm the best, but they do see that, oh, an adult can still have fun. An adult can still be a kid. And an adult can still command a room. You've got some confidence. Oh, you can move. Oh, you eat healthy. Like, those are the things that you live a productive life, and you don't make a bunch of excuses for everything, and you're not scared of everything, and you're not you have a little bit of jam. Yeah. Right. That's right. That's what I think. Yeah. It's definitely not being going out and stabbing a deer with your bare hands. Well,
there's some. The reason I like this is because people get lost in the terms, and I don't really know why. Like, there's traditional things about men that are actually really good, right? Like you said, like, you're somebody who can be responsible and be like a protector, be a provider, be a fill in the blank with all those things. Yeah. And it's not that you have to be all those, but it's like you're capable of being all those. and then you can figure out where to appropriately apply each of those qualities in the best way when you're navigating your life, whether it's in a relationship or with your kids or with your whoever. And I find that gets lost in like being an alpha, like being a guy that can just always runs the room or is the loudest or is the most aggressive or whatever. And that's not what that means. That's not what, to me, when you say like raising men, it's taking all those qualities that have really, really beneficial parts to them and developing them and applying them properly with confidence, not in a way where you're insecure, and doing it to the appropriate degree when it is appropriate to use those things, And I don't think like people, and especially in how like society is today, it's people look at those types of qualities like they're bad, and it's bad when it's bad, but it's good when it's good. Like if you're in a relationship and you have a wife or whatever, it's a biological drive. It's nice to feel like somebody is there to take care of you and protect you, and vice versa for the man to the woman, right? It's like, it's nice to have a wife that, cares about you and actually has your best interest at heart and is there in the ways that you're not there for her. And that's, to me, like, that's the whole point of the dynamic of your relationships, is that person should fill in the things that you don't have and vice versa. And that's why like men and women bring different things to the table that is good for both people. And those things should be developed. So when you talk about raising men, it's like getting the kids when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and those things that they're already driven to do, like be strong, being a strong person, and define the word strong in the best way, and taking that and developing that to make them someone who's has those qualities, can apply them, and doesn't take advantage of the fact that they have them. Because you see that especially with athletes when they're young. It's like they're confident, they're athletic, they're normally the more dominant type of personalities when they're in a room. And being able to have that, but harness it and use it in the best way for yourself and for everybody around you, and not going too far where now it starts to be a problem. Where it's like, you're way too aggressive. Or why do you think why are you way overconfident when you shouldn't be? And those types of problems, that's kind of where you draw the line. And people, a lot of times when they talk about that, especially today, they jump right to the negative part of it, where it's like there's no benefit to any of those qualities ever. And it's like, well, that's,
come on, man.
Yeah, come on, right? So like, I think that's what we take in here, like in this gym. It's because I look at it more outside of the hockey lens, kind of what we were talking about with David yesterday on the podcast. Like outside of the hockey lens, it's just the life lens. As a man, that means certain things because you're a man. And you want to develop those things in the best way and not let it go too far where now you're the overbearing, over-aggressive asshole type that fits perfectly into that alpha stereotype that is just not good for anybody, including you. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it makes sense. You're talking about the guy that sits in his garage, drinks his beer, is gruff and all that stuff. But the bottom line is, a guy should be strong. Should be strong, but he's also, I'm not talking just only physically, mentally, physically, emotionally strong, but that means he's also got to be weak to the point where he can set back and humble himself and say, oh, I have to be soft in this situation. Like, for example, when you see your wife, maybe not, you don't have the capability to sit there, because I have to fight through this. Like sometimes I go, come on, man, like just stop.
For sure.
But we're different, right? So I have to sit down and say, okay, what's going on? I have to be weak enough or humble enough to go down and say, okay, what's going on? Or with my son or my kids, I have to say, okay, I was a hard ass here, not hard ass, whatever. But I got to show some humility or some softness to show them that I'm actually a human, that I can be approachable. Right. So like there's a happy medium with that, right? And like you said, is it wrong? Like, should guys know how to fight? I think so. I think so.
Me too.
Like I don't know if it's good if you don't know, if you've never gotten a fight before. I'm not saying go out and fight, but if you've never been to a boxing ring or you don't know how it is to, what you can do to someone or what you can't do to someone. But if something happened to your family, like can you actually maybe scare someone away? I think that's good. But then can you also be in a situation where you can diffuse it because you're smart enough to diffuse a situation as well? You don't have to fight. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's like there's always that dichotomy, right?
Well, and it goes to dichotomy of leadership book that Jocko talks about.
Yeah.
Like there's like dichotomy and everything, but to me, wrapping it all up, it's being a capable man, just being capable and capable in all situations, because being like compassionate or empathetic or having that capacity or being able to show some emotion, that's not weakness as a man. Like those are all actually moments of strength. Like you have enough, either enough like knowledge or wisdom or experience or whatever the word is, that you can apply that when you need to, and you're not just one way all the time, because that's actually a problem. You know, and so, and all those that is like at the deeper philosophical level of what we try to teach the kids when they're here as young boys, because that is what will make them capable later on when they're become adults and they're in their lives and they're treating women properly and they're responsible in their jobs, and they can be a provider and they can be someone who has a little bit of jam in their life, and you get respect and you get opportunity and you live a good life when you have those things. And none of those things that's not a bad thing to do that. That's actually really a good goal. And that's what, as parents, when you put your kids in sports, maybe you've never articulated it that way, but that is kind of what you're trying to do. Like you want your kids to learn those lessons. And for young girls, it's the same thing on their own track, right? They have their own track of things that they're trying to develop in the same way, you know? And it's just it's just a really important thing, man. And because you see so many kids, I mean, people I went to school with that are around my age now, when I look at them and I see like how they're living their life, not that I'm same as you, like not that I have everything all figured out and I'm the most perfect person ever, but it's like, man, there's some gaps that are costing you.
Well,
you know?
I was just saying, as you're going there, I'm just thinking of three things off the top of my head. Number one, one time I brought, a couple times, but the first time this happened, I brought Charlie to a girl's house and we were picking her up, right, to wherever we were going. So we pulled in the driveway and he pulled out his phone. And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm just letting her know I'm here." I go, "No, go get out of your car, get out of the car, go to the door." And he's like, "Ah, Dad." I said, no, you get out of the door. And I had a couple seconds, right? So you get out of the door because mom and dad are around. Their mom and dad is around. They're going to appreciate that you had the nuts to go and walk to the door and say, you know, "I'm here and nice to meet you." And they get to put a face to the name. And then you walk out of there and they say, "What a nice kid. He's got some jam to him." You know, it takes balls to walk up to a door and say, "Hi, Mr. Whatever," or "Mrs. Whatever." And they say, "Oh, hi." And it's uncomfortable. It's a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
Another thing, just the other day, Charlie was with an NHL coach the other day, right? And something got screwed up in the scheduling. So Charlie was sorting it out. And he's 16. He's not 3, but he's not 25 either.
Right.
But the easy thing to do is he goes, "Okay, I got to get a hold of him." Well, I said, "Well, you should probably get a hold of him." He goes, "Yeah, I'm going to get a hold of him right now." So he pulled out his phone. He started texting. I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, I'm just texting him." I said, "Do you think that's the best way to do it? Or does it seem a little bit more mature or more reasonable to make a phone call?" He goes, "Yeah, you're right." So he made the phone call and it went really well. But those you stand out, man. You stand out. And there was one more that I was thinking about that. And it's just watching naturally, because he's seen me do it or he's seen other people do it. Like with women holding a door open or seeing someone that needs just a little bit of help, and kids, whatever, and hold the door, pick something up for someone because they know that they don't necessarily need it, but it's nice.
Yeah.
So it's like he's a brute,
right?
But he's a nice person, and that's what I want, right? Absolutely, so that's like that dichotomy. Yep. You're not just a meathead. That like.
Yeah, the same kid that could go get in a fight is the same kid that will hold the door when you're when you're walking up to the restaurant or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's and even with women too, because this is where people get all like, it's like, "Oh, well, I don't expect, like, no man needs to do that for me," or whatever. And it's like, it's not about that. It's that I will do it if you would like that. If you wouldn't, then I won't. That's fine. But it's just the fact that as the man, you're thinking that you want to do something for this other person that would make them feel like they're taken care of or that they matter in some way, you know? And that's not a bad thing. You know what I mean?
I pissed off a lady it was in March.
Why?
She's carrying something, and I walked up, and I know her a little bit.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, I'll grab that for her." She goes, "No." I said, "Are you sure?" And she was like, not happy.
Really?
Sorry.
Well, and that's like the extreme. That's the extreme on the female. It's like you're offended that I'm just asking if you need help. Like you could just say no, and that's fine. You know. But
not happy.
I know. But anyways,
well.
it's all good things. You know, it's all good things. It's not the stereotype of being the alpha is not what it means to be someone who's like a quality man. If we're going to talk about men specifically, you know.
Yeah, and so like you say, if you get in the gym, where we bring this back to the hockey part is in the gym. That's what we're not just trying to teach them how to be hockey players. We teach them how to get to work in a room, to be a good teammate, to be respectful to the coaches, to know that before it actually happens.
Yep.
Right. We talked about this on a podcast last week or whatever. What do you do in a training camp for the first time? Do you talk to your coach? Like you, not necessarily, but if it's available, you have the if it's not what's my word, if it's appropriate, then you have a conversation, you say hi, all that kind of stuff. But you learn that in the gym here that you know, guys struggling to get a rep out, you know, you go there and you help them out, or you do a little bit of encouraging, like good job, whatever, makes you a better dude. That's all.
Absolutely.
It's not a big deal, man.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not a big deal.
So I'm going to transition into the topic here for today. I got an email from David, who he's a member on the site, and he's been going through some videos and he listens to the podcast, and he sent me an email the other night, and it actually plays in nicely with the topic that I want to talk about today. So I'm going to start with this. We'll address this, and then we'll get into the topic. So he says, Eric and Andy, hi guys. I thoroughly enjoy your podcasts. I listen to them during the day while at work. Not quite sure what I'll do once I've caught up with them, but I guess I'll have to patiently wait each week. Anyways, I'd really like your opinion on off-ice training for the U11 age group. A little backstory, I've been coaching my son's teams for the past 5 seasons. He's trying out for the A2 rep team, which I actually don't know what that means, this year. And
what's the rep team?
The A2 rep team.
Okay, I don't know what that means.
This year, and I believe he has a decent chance at making the team, and in turn, I would like to be the coach. Our association strongly encourages all rep teams, A1 and A2, I don't know what that means, to include some type of off-ice training once a week. I would be very interested in hearing your thoughts on this, as well as what you guys think is actually appropriate and beneficial to them as hockey players. I don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it, if that makes any sense. I would like it to actually help them and be worthwhile. Thanks, Coach Dave. So Dave says hockey, which I think that would be out west.
BC.
Yeah, BC. So I'm not sure about the A1, A2 thing, but that's kind of besides the point. So I gave him a little answer, but I told him we would talk about it here because I wanted to talk in this episode about how training changes in seasons, because most of the people, most hockey players at least, they're starting their seasons over the next couple weeks. So still have some training camps going on, and then they'll be getting into their season. And common mistake I used to make, 2 mistakes, each end of the spectrum. One would be I would not work out at all off ice. On ice is also another consideration, like how you should train individually outside your team training on the ice. And then once I started really getting into working out, I was training too much during the season. And I didn't really have a method for what I should be actually doing when I have to play games and perform, and how to optimize for that. So I wanted to talk about that by age group, by level of play, off ice, on ice, and kind of touch on all those things. But first, starting with Dave's email here, he's asking about the U11 age group. So I gave him a few notes about the off ice thing. So I want to start with your thoughts first of all as the coach, just in general, and then I'll get a little more specific into the off ice training stuff at that age group. So whatever
Just
thoughts you have, whatever thoughts you have on that.
That's a hard question. No, it's not really a hard question. It's well, yeah, it is. It's a hard question because like he asked some substantial information.
Yeah,
it's hard to give really good information at U10, U11.
Yeah,
you're starting off herding cats.
Yeah.
Herding cats, like
yeah,
right,
not hurting them.
My experience is even on the ice, and yes, on the ice and off the ice, but I would say especially off the ice is the mindset is really tough to get them to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and not to sound like a complete jackass, but the level of commitment as a hockey player will determine quite a bit the level of response you get in the fitness side. Right? Because a lot of those kids I just kind of wish I knew what A1, A2 was. I'm assuming it's probably, yeah, you can look it up, but I'm assuming it's probably like a travel team, or maybe a second tier travel team, or one's older, one's younger, something like that, I would assume. Anyways, it's to do off ice training for U11. It's like, you got to look at your long-term athletic development plan if it wants to be beneficial, and that's going to be things like aiming, jumping, endurance, Okay, so there we go. I got it. I'm just thinking back to Mr. Rose. He was a genius at it. So Mr. Rose, when we were kids, used to make us do not make yeah, he made us on Saturday mornings. He made us do off ice training after our Saturday morning practices. We'd have to do like around the arena. We'd probably do like 16 laps, maybe the Indian run, a little bit of sprinting and stuff like that, and a lot of jumping, which was actually very beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like what I said about herding cats is some guys are in and some guys are out.
Yeah.
Some guys, and even myself, as committed as I was, there was days on the Saturday morning it was like, okay, whatever. So you got to keep that in mind when you're doing 10-year-olds, is that there's only so much attention and bandwidth that you're going to get out of them. So the number one thing is, if you have a good relationship with them or a good you can communicate well with them, is to explain to them why they're doing this, right? So if they can, and then you're not going to get them all, by the way. So it's that explain that this is going to be good for you, because like I would say something, because guys, I know that most teams don't do this the way that we're going to do it. It's going to give you a little bit of an edge, because it's going to build your endurance, and you give them the whys, right? It's going to build your endurance, give you a little bit stronger, because there's only so much you can do.
Right.
So I would do things like a lot of jumping. So you could use stairs, endurance work. That's going to be helpful, because they're not going to necessarily get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
I would do some push-ups, sit-ups, stretching, not the boring stretching, like a little bit more dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would try to do things in a competitive manner. If you go in a competitive manner, you get kids' attention a little bit longer, as opposed to just going out for a half or a kilometer run, or whatever. So if you can do it in a competitive manner, that would be really good. You could do the ladders and stuff like that. It's not bad for a little bit of coordination. But that's my initial thoughts. That's what it would be. But and I wouldn't do it for too long.
Right.
I would do it for a period of time where they get something out of it, but definitely competitive.
See, I love that, because I just kind of put you on the spot. I didn't tell you anything I said, and we kind of said the same thing that I said to him anyways, which is funny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're like pretty aligned. So first, the A1, A2 thing, it's just the way that they designate their travel teams in BC. So it's kind of the same, or would be similar as like AAA, AA, but instead of calling it AAA, AA, they do. There's AAA, but it's like A1, A2, whatever. So, anyways, so I basically said more or less what you said to him. So I'll give you my thoughts on this. I find with the younger age groups, and even with not even necessarily with just the younger age groups, even older age groups, I find people that are coaches don't really have the knowledge of how to do off-ice training properly, which is what makes it tricky, right? Because you don't know what to do. So what you default to a lot of times is conditioning, because conditioning is easy. It doesn't take any real knowledge. You don't have to teach a whole lot. It's just kind of go hard, right? And so what I kind of steered them away from that, saying I wouldn't focus just on conditioning if you actually want it to be worthwhile. So because the easy thing to do is say, we're going to do an hour, we're going to do dynamic warm up, the speed ladder, and then run hills and we'll do that once a week for the whole season or whatever. It's like, that doesn't take a lot of teaching. It doesn't take a lot of planning, and you can just do that. And most people do that. And because the thing that a lot of coaches say, and one of the young kids actually told me their coach would say to them, we're going to be the best conditioned team in the league or whatever. And like, that's just the trope that these coaches use when they really don't know what they're necessarily doing. So anyways, what I said to him basically along the same lines as you was, teach them how to be athletes. If you have an hour and they're young, teach them to be athletes. So that's learning the like basic movement patterns, right? So that's squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, crawling, and carrying. Those are the things that I like. I use those 6. And was it San Jose? What was San Jose strength coach's name again? Steven Delustro. Yeah, he was the one that categorized it like that in those 6 movements. Or maybe 5, and then I added one. But those
5 and
those are the ones that I like, because it's just teaching them to be an athlete. And I told them the same thing. It'll be a little bit more tedious and boring if you just sit and say, okay, we're gonna squat for 20 minutes and work on our squats. I said, if you can find a way to make it fun and engaging for the kids doing those movements, then that will keep them bought into kind of what you're doing, right? So if you can explain to them, like, this is going to be the foundation that leads you to your gym workouts when you hit puberty, get a little bit older, that's actually worth your time, is teaching them how to play around with those movements. And if you can do it, like you said, the competition, like in races or like an obstacle course or some kind of game where they're doing the movements and having fun and whatever, and they're not really, because they're not necessarily going to pay attention to learning the movements correctly, but they might by default just through repetition. And if you give them some teaching points off the hop. But what I said to him to start is, it takes some knowledge up front on your part to teach them how to do those movements properly. So if you can spend kind of like what I did with our young group this summer, I think they were the 2010 group, 09s and 10s. We took the first 2 weeks and just practiced the movements, which is boring and not great, but you do that for 2 weeks where it's one session. You said one session a week. You do it for the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it takes for them to be have a little bit of competence with those movements. Now you can start to get into your games and stuff. And if you explain it to them why you're doing it, it's always the purpose thing, right? It's the purpose-driven type of teaching where they'll understand, okay, I'm doing this so that I can get to this thing later that is more fun or will be more engaging to me, or I can see I'll get better by doing that. And that's a better way to do it. So if you have an hour a week or whatever with a young group like that, that's what I would say. You can still do your conditioning, like you said, the ladders and the running and that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't focus exclusively on that, because for you to say, I don't want to do something for the sake of doing it, well, that's what you'd be doing if it's just conditioning all the time, because they're already going to be skating 4 times a week. They get their conditioning. That's what I said to all the guys going into their season this year. It's like they do their team workouts, which just pisses me off when they do these team workouts, because it's such a waste of time, because they go there and just get another bagger for the most part when you go do a team workout.
You go to a gym, that's what it is. Like a lot of coaches, even in hockey, or people that even run hockey camps, it's like the intensity is not, it's not real. It's like the coach, know, screaming and yelling things like, let's go, like all that kind of stuff. It's like, that means nothing.
Exactly.
And to bag someone that's not intelligent, right? I can skate anybody into the ground.
Yeah.
Not hard.
Exactly.
Right.
So and that's kind of what I was saying to him, is like, if you want it to be something worthwhile off the ice, then give them something they're not getting when they're on the ice, which the conditioning and speed stuff they're getting on the ice. And like to your point again, it's not that they're going to necessarily get stronger because they don't have the hormones yet that you'll get when they hit puberty, but it's that they're learning to move their body as an athlete. That's that is what foundation is. Like foundation is be an athlete, and then you get specific to your sport once you have that foundation late. So especially at that age, that's kind of what's more appropriate, but it takes some work as the coach on your part to learn how to teach some of those things. And if you're somebody who never does a squat, or you never go to the gym yourself, then maybe that's going to be a pretty big barrier to putting a plan like that together. But that's just the honest truth of what would be actually beneficial when they're that age, you know? The other thing I want to say too is, especially with, as the coach, when you're dealing with the parents, is you have to try to explain to the parents what the point is, like, because this is the biggest gap that I find with parents, is they don't know what they're looking for. I was just talking to one of the dads the other day about this, and he was saying, you know, like when my kid works out, like I don't even know what he's doing. It's like I just bring him, I drop him off, and then I pick him up. How was your workout? Good. Yeah, you look really sweaty. Good. It's like they don't know how to judge what they're doing, you know. And just for parents or for coaches that don't know, the amount of sweat that you see is not necessarily an indicator of the quality of the workout, you know? So especially when it starts to get into season mode, just because you're a puddle and your shirt's soaked doesn't mean that that was a good thing that you did, or that the workout was good for you at that time, you know? And explaining that to parents up front, like, we're doing this and we're learning these movements and whatever. It's not just going to be a beatdown. It's not just going to be a bagger, because it's not always appropriate for everything to be a bagger, you know?
An example. So if you listen to actual speed training, like for like in a running setting, if you did, you know, they're called flying 20s, whatever, however you want to call them. If you did your actual speed work, the amount of time it takes to do the speed work would be a couple times. This I'm talking about a good athlete. You'd be doing maybe a couple times a week. 7 is, and you get past 7 20-meter sprints, and now you're getting a little bit too much. And the rest in between your sprints are 3 to 5 times longer, because you need to be fully recovered to get the maximum recovery. So if someone watches that, they're going to say, well, you didn't work very hard.
Right.
You ran 20 meters as hard as you can 7 times. So evidence of that was, Charlie and I were at the track early summer, and there's obviously a very good sprinter. Okay, and she was doing her warm ups. So by the time Charlie and I got our warm ups in, because he was doing his flying 20s, you remember the ones that you designed for him. And by the time we did our warm up, he was done his. I was a little longer because I wasn't doing speed training. I was just doing tempo runs. She was still warming up. So we hung around a little bit, and then she got into some of her speed work. And the speed work was, you'd watch and you go, wow, she's fast. Look at how she moves. Amazing. We're talking, she's 40 minutes in, and she just started to do her actual work. And then it was like loafing around. It's like she wasn't doing anything for a while because she had to recover. So the myth of sweating hard is quality work is totally not true. It is depending on what you're doing.
Right.
If it's conditioning, yeah, you better be sweating.
That's right.
If you're looking for just speed or just straight power, it's a different workout.
Yeah. So I wanna start to transition to some of the older ages now to kind of explain what you should be looking for during the season in terms of your training. So I'm gonna do like a little bit of a framework of how I think about it, and then what you should be doing in the season, and then we'll get into some of the on-ice stuff after that. So to me, the way that I think about, if you're training as an athlete, and this could be any sport, it's not just hockey, I kind of put things in 4 buckets. You have your conditioning is 1, you have speed work is 2, you have strength work is 3, and then power, which is like that strength speed combination.
Yep.
So when you're training, you should be working towards one of those 4 things. It should be one of those 4 things.
Yep.
Sometimes there'll be a little bit of combination, like you're doing both together, but those are the 4 pieces that you're looking at. So when you go to the gym, you should have which of those 4 things in mind. What am I trying to do today? So in the off season, when you're not playing your games and you're not doing anything that's based on you performing at your optimal level, this is the time where we train all 4 of those, because you're not on the ice as much getting a disproportionate amount of one of the 4 or whatever, if that makes sense. So in the summertime, when it's off season, you should be taking care of all 4 of those things.
Yep.
Conditioning, speed, strength, power, but you should have focused time in each of those areas. So if you're working on conditioning, work on conditioning. If you're working on strength, work on strength. If you're working on speed, work on speed. Power, right? Again, sometimes there'll be some crossover, but it shouldn't really be that for the most part. Now, as you get closer to the season and we start to get more into our kind of game ready state, then you're going to change the ratio of how you're working on things, right? So you're not necessarily going to be spending as much time in the gym doing conditioning, because now you're on the ice 4, 5, 6 times a week, which is all conditioning.
Yep. You're
not going to be spending a whole lot of time working on speed off the ice, because you're doing so many sprints on the ice in your sport.
Yep.
So as you start to get into the season, the conditioning and speed pieces are kind of taken care of with your on-ice stuff, right? The volume training that you're going to get is taken care of. So what's the point of our training when we're off the ice? So at the young level, like I said, when you're before puberty and you're not really in the gym, it's the learning the movement patterns that you would use if you were to be doing a gym workout. Those are your squats, your hinges, your push-pulls, all those things, right? Once you're in that zone of like 13, 14 plus, or you're playing junior now, or you're playing pro now, or whatever you're doing, the gym time or the workout time off the ice should be strictly strength, maybe a little bit of power, and then your injury prevention type stuff. Yep. Which, if you do that correctly, you might walk out of the gym and not really feel like you're sweating.
Yeah.
Because like you said with the speed training, if you're doing strength for quality, you're going to be taking long rest periods. It's going to be low reps. You're not going to be getting your heart rate up very high through that workout. And what's going to make you sweat is when you get your heart rate up, right? Because your temperature increases, you start sweating. So when you're in the gym, you should be focused primarily on your injury prevention, your mobilization. That's where those really long warm-ups are going to come in.
Yep.
And then maintaining the strength that you built and a little bit of the power that you've built through that off season.
Yep.
And that's it. There shouldn't be, it should be very low volume meaning the total number of sets and reps that you're doing, the total amount of load that you're carrying. It should be low.
Yeah.
And then the pace that you're moving at should be slow. It should be
just
slow.
to remind your muscles,
right,
and stimulate your muscles to remind you that you still can squat 250 pounds.
Right. And
you don't want it to go down to 200. Like if to maintain
exactly.
it's a couple sets.
And the common thing that people think is, well, I don't want to lift that heavy because I don't want to be sore. And what makes you sore is muscle damage, which comes from lots and lots of volume, right? So lots of volume meaning high number of reps, high number of sets. But if you come in the gym and you're doing 2 sets of 4 or 2 sets of 3 or whatever that are super heavy, like close to your maximum, if you keep that every week you're doing that, you'll never be sore. You won't be sore at all because there's not enough work to cause the damage. You're doing enough work to get the stimulus where your muscles have to activate to carry that load, but you're not going to be damaging them so much that you're sore for the next 3 days. And that was a common thing that I always thought when before I got into working out was, well, I don't want to be sore. And then my mistake later was I would stay in the gym, but I would be doing way too much volume. So now I'm taking away from my performance on the ice, which is what the goal is now during the season, right? So it's important that you start to shift how you think about your training as the season starts to come in, right? So the season starts, now I'm going towards my strength maintenance and a little bit of power stuff, and then my injury prevention, mobility, good warm-ups, and making sure that I'm keeping my body in good shape kind of thing, right? So it's not the sprints, it's not the conditioning, it's not the speed training. You don't need to spend your time doing that off the ice because you get it on the ice. That'll make kind of sense. I know I went on a tangent there, but
that makes total sense. You're going so how do you get your speed training on the ice? Well, every time you take off, it's a sprint. That you're doing your quick feet. You're generating power, right? You're going as fast as you can for at least for a short period of time, several times in a practice or in a game. So that's taken care of. Your conditioning is because you're on the ice all the time. You're sweating. You're out of breath. So there's your conditioning. And so to maintain strength is the thing that'll go because you're not working it all the time. So you're just reminding yourself and nudging yourself. Okay, get in the gym, bang, because his muscles is part of brain and muscle they work together. So it's that connection, reminding those circuits that yes, I can lift heavy still.
So talk a little bit about we mentioned it yesterday when we were talking on that podcast again, but talk a little bit about the importance of your training intention, because what you said right there was where you're getting your speed training, you're getting it on the ice. Where you're getting your conditioning, you're getting on the ice. And then you just gave 2 examples, right? If you're doing a flow practice, your heart rate's up, you're sweating. Every time the coach blows the whistle, that's a quick start. Or it should be. Right? Unless you don't think about it, which a lot of people don't think about it. And this is why they don't have the knowledge, or they're not paying attention enough to know, like, okay, on the ice I'm getting this, off the ice I'm getting this. So talk about kind of the importance of having the intention.
Like during practice?
Both off the ice, on the ice, practice, and whatever. Just talk a little bit about that.
Now, you're not talking about like coming to the gym, whose intention, your dad or the kid?
No, I'm talking about you're as the person training.
Yeah, it's hard, man, because people get tired. Players get tired. They get, it's November. I've been on the ice almost every day, and just it's another practice. You can be in a bad mood. You can have things going on in your head, things at home, and when you come to the practice, just getting through it sometimes. But the mindset, if you actually want to do something with the game, is you have to have an intention, and if you don't, you've almost wasted a day. So, for example, if you come to the practice just to do a practice, where did you get better? But if you came to the practice, say, okay, like you talked about skill buckets, it's something that I like to say too, is those skill buckets have to be full. So if I know that my shot needs to get better, or maybe it's not better, but I haven't been scoring goals, then maybe one of the things I need to do is today for practice, like my intention today is to make sure that I pick whatever it is, okay, low blocker side. Every shot I'm throwing low blocker side, I'm gonna nail it. That's an intention. Well, what'll happen after you do that for a practice, and you're going to start getting better. It's an intention. It's good, right? So it's the same thing with when you're starting off a drill. You can take off like kind of lazy, or you can have an intention of every time I go, I'm going to make sure those 3 strides are very explosive, right? If you do that, you will, because your mind muscle connection, you will improve that. Not necessarily dramatically, but you're not losing. Right. Another intention is when you get to I'm going to make sure that I stop, never curl, never do a big figure skating circle. We're going to stop at the net after every shot. Those intentions are good habits, right? So as far as on the ice, those are things that are very, very important. If you don't have an intention, then
it's everything, man.
Anything could happen.
Yeah.
Anything could happen, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not working on something, then you're working on something negative, probably, right? So with intention, you can measure yourself and say, okay, I did good today. I did what I needed to do.
And then that even goes, like in the gym, there's an easy example of this too, because there's actually evidence now about intention. They've done studies on this. It's like if you're doing a squat and you try to move the bar as fast as you can,
100%.
even if you measure the bar speed and the bar doesn't move faster, right? So if I go do a squat with 225 on the bar and it goes whatever kilometers per hour up or meters per second up, and then the next rep I do it as fast as I can and it goes the same speed, I get more benefit from the fact that I tried to move it as fast as I can, right? Because you're teaching those muscle fibers to try to move quickly, right? So the intention is everything, off the ice, on the ice, doesn't matter what you're doing. And I don't think, especially on the ice, people don't think of practice as training. And I remember that when I was a kid, because I never had that. I never made an intention. I never thought, I'm going to try to hit low blocker every time, or I'm going to make sure every start is as fast as I can. Sometimes I just did it by accident, but I never did it on purpose, where I was like, I'm going to train this today. Because guys, they show up to practice, like you said, and they don't think of it as they would a workout in the gym, where it's like, I'm in the gym trying to get faster, so I'm going to make sure that my jumps are fast or whatever. When you're at practice, every drill is an opportunity that you could train something. And it's not about being a crazy person either. It's just like having a little bit of something, like, I'm going to try to focus on this today at practice and doing it, right?
You don't have to be nuts. You don't need 20 things. You should have one that you need to get better at. Or I'm going to catch every pass today. That's my intention. I'm going to put every pass in a good spot for my teammates. Another intention is for coaches is like think about it, right? If a coach comes and says, I'll run a few drills today. Well, what's your point? That's the point. What is your point?
What's your point?
You ran some pretty neat drills. What was the point of it? Well, if you look at your team and you say, our forecheck has been horrible. Like they're just not getting it. And you go, well, our intention today is everything is going to be about the forecheck. And everything we're going to do is getting pucks deep, or, 1, 2 guys in hard. And, whatever, you design your drills on that, then you've made progress. Or you're making progress, but there was a point to your practice. And there's too many times, like from a coaching standpoint, where there's no point. It's let's do, like, I'm being exaggerating here. Let's do the horseshoe, this, that, the other thing, and then bag at the end of it. It's like, what is the point? Did you even look at if the kids played? Maybe they just came off a tournament. I've seen this. Kids come off a 4-day, like where they get to the finals or quarterfinal, whatever, where they played 6 games in a weekend, and it's a Monday night practice at 9 or 8, and the coach is bagging them.
We bag on Mondays.
Mondays. Well, that's dumb. Right? How about do something fun, or something shooting, or something a little less, or with a good intent? For
sure. And that's the key thing as a coach, that you have to relay that message and think about it for yourself. Because like you said, coaches don't think about that. What are we trying to do with this? Especially when you get into like the team workout stuff too. That's the most common thing ever. It's like, we get the team workout. What are we going to do? We're going to go bag. Even the OHL guys, man, like guys would come back last year. One of our guys came back and was telling me that their workouts were circuits that they were doing in the season. It's like, you guys skate at least 7 times a week. It's like, why are we doing another circuit? That doesn't make any sense, And so just having the intention.
If you're in the chubby club, that's different.
Right. Well, yeah. Right. If you're in the chubby club, that is different.
That's a different ball game. But most guys aren't in the chubby club.
Yeah, at that level, right? Especially, you would think that. So, just wrapping up the off ice thing, to have a point to what I'm saying is, when you're training off ice during the season, strength work, injury prevention stuff at the older ages. When you're younger, like pre-puberty or around the time where you're just getting introduced to the gym, it's learning the foundational movements. And for either group, whether you're younger or older, those workouts and that training can and probably will feel underwhelming. Like, you're gonna walk out of the gym and be like, man, I don't know if like that was good, or if that helped me, or whatever. And that's why you want to have a trainer or a coach who can explain to you why you're doing what you're doing and how it's actually going to help you, instead of just thinking, well, I need to go as fast as I can through these 4 stations because pace is everything and speed is everything and whatever, So that's what I wanted to say, that just to wrap on the off ice thing. Now I want you to go into, unless you have something else.
Just one more point. Just talking about being sore.
Yeah.
So George St. Pierre's trainer, what's his name?
Firas?
Yeah. Firas Zahabi.
Yeah,
Zahabi.
Yeah, Firas Zahabi.
He talks about training, and he said that you should never be sore. Now he's talking martial arts. He goes, you should never ever be sore. So like the controversy is like, well, but. And he goes, no, you should never go that hard, because if I go that hard that I can't perform tomorrow, because you're talking someone that's in season all the time, right? Yeah. Can't perform tomorrow, then that's a workout that I miss. So you should go to the point in season where you're always able to do something else, because if you can, then you're getting 300 and some workouts a year as opposed to maybe 200. And that was a thought that he had, and I thought that was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually in the season too. Like, this is the difference between pushing for progress versus maintaining what you have. When you're trying to push to grow, or you're pushing to add or whatever, then you're going to enter those zones of overreaching, and you actually have to get an adaptation, right? If you have to go a little bit over what you're capable of doing, so that you adapt up. But when your goal is, I need to perform in this game or in this sport or whatever, then that's not the time to do the overreach part. That's the time to stay where I'm at and make sure I don't lose, so that next off season, where I start to make my gains again, I'm starting from a higher threshold than I did the season before. And that's how progress goes. So it's a shift in mindset between maintaining versus progressing when you're doing the in-season stuff, right? So that's a good point. So maybe we can wrap up talking about the on-ice stuff. So training skill stuff versus team stuff versus whatever else, however else you want to talk about it. How do you frame doing the on-ice work in the season if you're thinking about training? I know you touched on the practice, like having intention at practice and stuff, but just
so are we talking about team practices, or are we talking about your own type of training?
Both. Let's talk about both a little bit.
Okay. So on your own personal training, it's like gets tricky during the season because you're doing a lot of conditioning. So it'll also depend on what your coach is doing, right? So if your coach has, because you've seen this, like there's a lot of different ways. If you're with a coach who, and I've seen this, where they talk on the board all day and the practices aren't very intense, then that's something you might want to address, is get on the ice with yourself, with your buddies, with a trainer, whatever, that can get you a little bit of pace to it. But I would always have a puck with you, right? A little bit of pace. But other than that, you want to look at skills that you don't get to work on quite as much that you would in a practice, right? So a lot of, obviously in a practice setting, you should be doing a lot of passing and a lot of forechecking, whatever. It depends on the level that you're doing. If you're working on your own, or you're doing private stuff, then you should be looking at, okay, what are my, like, here's the thing. Don't work on what you're good at. You can do a little bit of it, but you got to go with those skill buckets again, make sure they're full. So find the deficiencies that you feel that you need to work on, and that's what you're going to spend your time on. How often do you need to do that? Well, again, that the intention is mom and dad shouldn't be deciding how often you need this, right? More is not necessarily better. I think this is the responsibility of the player to take the onus upon himself to find a way to get better at it. So if it's shooting, then shoot pucks, man. Shoot a ton of pucks. If you need to go see a trainer for that, that's fine. But make sure you're doing your own part first. If it's stick handling, do lots of stick handling. I don't know if you necessarily have to have all the patterns and all that kind of stuff set by a coach, but just make sure you're touching the puck. But it's the skill piece should be more individual to you. I don't think you can go wrong with like different types of shooting during the winter. Like if you're going to go to a camp, if you got something, or clinics or whatever, if you got someone that can actually help you with your shooting and different variations of shooting. And I think the other thing when you're doing shooting is not just doing the perfect shot. Take things from weird angles, odd angles, bad passes and stuff like that. Learn how to, but again, have an intention. Do I want to have a harder shot? Do I want to have a more accurate shot? Do I want to have a quicker release? Those are three different types of shooting just there, right? So that would be one thing. If you're not a great skater, even though you might have skated all summer, you're not going to necessarily get worse, but you might not get better during the winter time. So there's something like, if that's a deficiency of yours, then I would say, if you're on the ice, then you can do a lot of edge. I hate using that word. Inside edge stuff, outside edge stuff, where you're low, and working on that intention, like focusing on getting low, making sure you have an intention, proper extension, proper recovery, meaning bring your feet underneath your hips. But it's about the intention, because you can go out there and just do skill stuff again without intention, and that's the part that I don't like. I don't like to talk about the skill stuff too much, because, well, I shouldn't say it like that. I don't like to promote going out and finding someone to train you all the time, because if if there's not an intention for you, then it's not necessarily a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I would say, if you're going to do skill stuff, if you have a smaller group where you need to work on one or two things, that's the intention. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I would say. Okay, that might be beneficial. Other than that, get on the ice or find your time to work on what you need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Okay, I don't want to have a whole bullshit conversation about nothing.
No.
Okay.
No, that's all I wanted you to say. But for the amount of time that you're doing it during the week too, you say like couple times a week outside of your normal practices, game schedule. Like if you're average amount of time you're on the ice, 2 practices, 2 games, or if you're at a higher level, 3-4 practices and 2 games. They're doing team stuff, so a couple times a week, just keeping everything sharp.
Yeah.
Like more of a either a. I'm trying to think of it in terms of the off ice stuff too, because it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like you're doing the skill stuff. It shouldn't be like a ton of pace.
Yeah.
Volume isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're doing skill work in that sense, because you're not going to be getting a ton of muscle damage or anything where you're super sore.
Yeah.
But you're on the ice practicing and stuff so much, so having enough where you're maintaining at least what you have, where you're not losing that nice feel that you have.
See, that's a good question, but this is where I'm actually very, very strongly opinionated on this. I would never want to tell a kid that just loves being on the ice. Like I'm not talking about lessons every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about someone that just loves to be on the ice, to say that's enough, because I know for me as a kid, I would want to be on the ice every second that I could. Not my mom and dad.
Right.
This is the important distinction. Is not my mom and dad saying, okay, there's ice. It was me.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime that I would be able to go and skate, I would do it. And I'm not talking at 18.
Yeah.
Kind of though.
Yeah.
But I'm talking as a youth.
Well, okay. So then what's, like, let's say minimum effective dose though? So it's like, if you're going to do some skill stuff, maybe there's no upper end, like practice as much as you want. Like you want to keep stick handle as much as you want to.
Right. And the beautiful thing about not having a coach is you get to do your own thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing. I remember young Andy. I watched Wayne Gretzky play, and I saw him do that Gretzky curl. Oh, and I'd do that for hours. Mm-hmm. What did that do for my hockey career? But I was Wayne Gretzky for a while.
Yeah.
And I got very good at that, by the way.
Right.
Or I'd watch Guy Lafleur coming down that wing and clapping one from the top of the circle, so I would practice it. That's good intention. There was an intention. That was good work, and that's quality work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't have someone say, no, do this and do this. And then it becomes work.
Yeah, for sure.
So I cut you off.
Minimum effective dose.
Well, if I'm assuming that you're interested.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Assuming like you're self-motivated, you want to do the training, you still have your team practices and games, all those things. Just like give the general case for the kid that actually wants to do the work.
Well, I think you gotta do something at least once a week.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on the ice a lot,
mm-hmm.
and you're probably doing some kind of physical activity. So I think once a week is quality.
Yeah, some focused quality time on what you need.
It goes back to like the spring hockey argument. Like my argument with spring hockey, it's like, okay, how many games do you need to play before it becomes just another game?
Right.
Right. So, and I found this with kids, like when we have our training, some of our training stuff, they think, well, I got to come every day. It's like, no, now it becomes a exercise in futility. It becomes a job. That's not what you want when you're training or when you're a kid. You want to be, I look forward to this so I can put my hour in or half an hour in and I can give good quality work. So once a week, like the kids that go out and do training every day, private lessons and a camp here and there, it's too much, man.
Right.
It's too much. Unless they were doing it on their own because they just love it. without mom and dad watching every move that they make.
Right.
Just go play.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. But once a week, if you did some quality training once a week, that you get to work on you. And here's my rationale behind that. If you can go and play on your weekends, and you have your 2 games on the weekend if you didn't have a tournament, and you have your practices in between, your skill work is something that you can, let's say it's on a Wednesday morning or a Wednesday afternoon. If you do your skill work, that you can take that into your practices and your games, and it's actually beneficial.
Yeah.
That's why I like doing, like, for an example, we're doing a session of like high-end volume training for stick handling, and then apply it to small area games, because like now you can take a skill that you worked on and directly apply it to your game. So it's like, okay, this works.
Yeah, that's an important thing too. Maybe just to backtrack a bit to the off ice thing, and then we can wrap it up. Is because I didn't give a prescription either. For me, it's a twice a week thing for strength program, off ice training program, and that's the other thing is you do things close to your game that get you ready for the game in the off ice setting and the on ice setting, right? Yeah. So if you really struggle with face offs, for example, and you can Thursday at the end of practice, you can take 5 minutes and just take however many face offs you can against somebody, and you have a game on Friday, it's going to activate you for that. The actual word is potentiate you for that movement pattern the next day, right? It'll be right at top of mind when you're getting into that. Whether it could be a game skill, it could be a workout thing. It's like even one of the things that I like to do on say a Wednesday or Thursday leading into the weekend is doing like quick jumps at that forward lean angle, or the quick sled pushes, not something that's super heavy, where like you feel like you're moving fast and you're in the same posture that you would be on the ice, because that's going to get you ready to go in that same kind of movement pattern when you're on the ice the next day or 2 days later or whatever. So that's a good point too, is like getting things that actually will get you ready to get into that game. You can structure your training to include things that look like your game or what you need to have fixed in your game as close to that game as possible. Yeah. Right. So that you don't have 4 or 5 days between when you last worked on it and the next time that you're going to apply it in that game setting or whatever. Right. So that's a good point. I think that's pretty good. We did off ice, on ice, age appropriate, training stuff and some prescriptions. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah. I just thought of something here.
What do you got?
We talked several times about this idea of training, right? And what I see, going back to that podcast we did, everything, everybody thinks that they have to make all the right moves all the time. And I couldn't tell you how many times someone has called me and said, Andy, can we get on the ice with you? He's got a camp next week or on Monday. So can we get on the ice this weekend before it goes like Saturday or Sunday? Like, it's urgent. All right. Yeah, whatever. I know I don't have it. And they're freaking out. What are you worried about? Right? And if you did like you said, your 4 pillars of working out plus the mobility, and you did a certain amount of training on the ice and you did at a good pace and stuff, it's like you when you were in university. It's like you don't have to study, man. I know that I'm going to pass. You're ready. So doing one extra stick handling session or shooting pucks on Saturday before you go is not going to make a difference. Zero. So that's one thing I want to say is have a plan, or just always be ready. And if you're always in shape, as you said, in season, if you're always working on your strength when you start in May next year, it doesn't hurt, right? And if you always have a stick in your hands, and you're always going to have some decent hands and can shoot a puck. Yep. So that's what I would say. My finishing thing would be like, just always be ready to go. Be appropriate about it, but if you do this the right way, then you're always ready to play. Yeah. And there's no secret to it, and there's no panic button that you have to press.
Yeah, and I said this at the end of the last podcast that we did with David there too. It's like there's no one way. There's not one recipe, because it's individual. You have to do what works for you and find the path that's going to work for you with your training. So people will often ask you, and they've asked me, it's like, what do I have to do? And it's like, it's not one thing, man. It's just, you have to figure out what you need to do. Yeah. There's not just like a follow the recipe thing, right? It's not specific enough, because things have to be specific to what you need, which is going to be different for everybody, you know? So you get really caught up, like you said, you'll get caught up on the day-to-day stuff, or you should in general have a plan, like you said, that you're following over time, but it's not going to be one day that you did an extra shooting thing that's going to make all the difference in the world or anything, right? It's got to
right.
be the plan. It's got to be a process you follow for a long period of time. So, cool. That's good. We'll leave it there for next week.